Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. Welcome to Transitioning into UX and Product Design, part of Designer Head YouTube channel. It is essentially a recording of the last session that I held on last Sunday, which typically is being held on last Sunday of every month. And it was the first session to kind of kick off the 2022. Which essentially we're more talking about what to expect in 2022 and what I think is coming. And of course, to answer as many questions as I can from people who are tuning in into those sessions. Without further ado, once again, thank you for tuning in and let's begin. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Thank you for tuning in. Can everyone hear me? Raise your hand. No raising hand. All right, I see hands. Awesome, awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. I see a lot of people are still joining. We're going to give people another few minutes to join. In the meantime, welcome to the 2022 Transitioning into UX and Product Design sessions that I hold typically on a monthly basis. It is a lot of you here. Thank you very much. I do appreciate people tuning in. Of course, it's always heartwarming to me personally that people are interested in hearing what I have to say. And obviously interested in my opinions or my experience that I share with people. Now, a few house rules as people joining the session is being recorded. This is a first time recorded session. I did last year's sessions. I have never recorded them. I basically just did them. And as people asked me previously that they wanted to listen to the session, but they are in different time zones. And so it was a little bit complicated for them to tune in. I decided to do several things. One is start recording those sessions specifically for those people who are in different time zones and cannot tune in at this specific time, which typically is the time when I hold those sessions. Unfortunately, that's the only time I have, typically on Sundays morning time. Now, these sessions are going to be living, for those of you who don't know, those sessions will be living on YouTube. I did launch a dedicated YouTube channel for my personal design rants, opinions, and views and whatnot. And also the channel will be dedicated to transitioning into UX and product design sessions and transitioning into UX product design specific videos that are not related to sessions themselves, but I will be covering certain different topics in depth for people who are transitioning and curious and interested to learn more about how to go about this and what to do next. The name of the channel is Designer Head. You can probably find it on YouTube. There is no videos whatsoever right now there, apart from just the intro. Obviously, the channel literally launched on Thursday this week, so I am super excited. It's incredibly new to me. I've never ran a YouTube channel, if you will, so that's going to be a interesting challenge this year for me, but I am all up for the challenge. So welcome, 2022. Let's begin. I see a lot of people here. Once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. And as I said, when I created this session we'll be talking about several things. One is I will be covering my specific quote unquote predictions of what I think 2022 is going to bring to the design industry and how it might be beneficial for people who are just entering the field, recently entered the field, thinking about entering the field. I'm going to cover a few different titles, a few different specific specializations, if you will, and what might be their future and which technology is definitely going to be interesting to follow, if you will. Now, let's start with last year. And I know it's new year, but I would like to start with last year. Now, last year, there were a few different things happening. One major thing that was happening is, as we all heard about it, is the Great Resignation. And I literally just got off the call before the session with a buddy of mine in the UK, who used to run a recruiting agency, and now he runs a company that specializes in educational programs for kids to educate them specifically on UX and design thinking. And we're talking about it a little bit, and it also obviously touched the UK and some other parts of the world. Australia apparently and got touched a lot by the Great Resignation and so forth. Now, what do I think this brings to people who are looking to get into this field? Now, there are obviously some benefits, obviously some downfalls, of course, for the Great Resignation, if you will. People are leaving their jobs. Why? For several reasons. Either they did not like the company, they did not think that they're getting paid enough, they did not like the benefits, they didn't want to go back to work at the office, they liked working remotely. And there is an array of other reasons why people might be leaving their current positions. What does it mean for people who are entering the field? The UX, product design, and so forth is, obviously, there's a lot of new spots. So obviously, companies are more and more realizing that they need to pay better, they need to provide better benefits, they need to allow flexible work schedules and work remotely and stuff like that. And of course, there's a lot of openings right now. However, keep in mind that, of course, as usual, because of all the boot camps and all the transitioning into UX and product design over the last couple of years, created this massive boom of people getting into the field. What I also see is that there is a lot more applicants for every single position. So what it means really, you guys got to stand out. Like that's just a given. So you have to be more individual. You have to show yourself as a unique personality, if you will, or a unique individual that will be in that workplace. But that's a great benefit. And if you think about it, more and more companies are realizing two things. One, they need to go digital, and their digital need to be usable and empathetic to users, satisfying their needs and so forth. So they do need UXers and product designers and so forth more than they used to. People are leaving their jobs in throes, if you will. And obviously now there's a lot more openings. Now let's talk about different titles for these different openings, right? One of the things that I did notice over the last year is a lot of people, especially the ones who are transitioning into product and UX design, don't necessarily apply for jobs. They're asking for anywhere between 1 to 2 to 3 years of experience. Just apply. That's my overall kind of recommendation. Just apply to that, because many companies that do write those descriptions, it's a wishful thinking. They would love to have somebody with 1 to 2 or 3 years of experience, but if they'll find somebody talented with less than 1 year of experience or thereabouts of a year of experience, of no experience at all, they'll probably gonna consider that as well. On that subject, what are the actual titles or professions or specializations, if you will, that I see coming in 2022? Now, UX designers, of course, it's going to stick around. Product designers going to stick around. Now, there is a little breakdown into two parts, right? One part is going right now into specialization, which I see a lot of big tech companies are looking for. Somebody who's more specialist in a very specific field. I also see a lot of mid-sized companies who are looking for people who are very specifically specializing in very specific part. That can be information architects, that can be ethnographer, that can be user researcher, that can be just a visual designer, right? Just designing the UIs, UI designer. And on the other side, I see from the kind of older tech, big tech companies such as Google's and Facebook's and whatnot, they seem to be shifting a little bit more into general roles. They're looking for people with a bit more diverse experience or a bit diverse background, not necessarily in design, but also a spectrum of where you're coming from, right? What's your previous experience? What did you do before? How does your previous experience influencing your current or future job as a designer? Now, there's another interesting emerging title that I see in the last couple of years, and that is UX writers. And I know a lot of people kind of maybe considered that or maybe didn't. And I think people should really, because right now, more and more companies realizing that communicating to their users is a lot more complicated than they thought. It's not as simple as communicating to them as they would communicate to system administrators or tech people or whatnot. So they're trying to find more and more ways of how do they humanize their product. But humanizing their product, the only thing they really do need for that is somebody who specializes on how to talk to people. Who specialize how to talk to people, typically writers, copywriters, regular writers, right? But the specialty of UX writers are people who are specializing in creating this level of communication through the product experience, not just what text appears on different screens, but how does that text then relates to the next screen and the next screen, and how it might be related to this last screen and a screen before that, and how it all connects together as the overall experience of the product. So UX writers is definitely on the rise. And actually recently, somebody asked that question in Design Leadership Forum about how do we as design leaders feel about UX writers? And I immediately answered a very bright future. I do see this to be the next kind of a hot profession, if you will, or field, where companies more and more will be realizing that they need one or two, or even maybe an army of UX writers to make sure that every little communication, even on the level of a macro communication, is important, such as button names, headers, I don't know, little words here and there that make the experience more delightful and more interesting and feels more like a person communicates to person, right? And a great example of that, something that I brought as an example a while ago in my last company, and when people ask me what's the difference between just a copywriter and the UX writer, I said copywriter will write a great copy, meaning you give them a screen, you give them a screen, and they will write an incredible copy for that part. But if you give a UX writer the task of creating an experience with proper language, the difference will be is this. When you go to a coffee shop and you approach a barista and you say, I would like a tall coffee or a medium-sized coffee with, I don't know, almond milk. Barista says, coming right up. You turn around and you walk away. Barista hollers you and says, hey, hold on. Are you sure you want almond milk? Is your reply as a human being to that other human being, is your reply is okay or cancel, or is it yes or no? And that's really is the difference between a software or a product or an app communicating to a person as another human being or another person, or as yet another tech product, right? That's where UX writers are so important and will be a lot more valuable going forward. I have one on my team in my company. It was one of my first hires when I just joined the company, because I think it's incredibly important for the product to communicate to humans in human language, if you will. Now, let's touch a little bit on, for another 10 or 15 minutes, on the industry itself. And then I see some questions popping up in messages, and then I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. And I'll open up the rest of the session, which another 30 minutes for Q&A with everyone who wants to ask me any questions they might have about going to 2022 or general ones. There are a few emerging technologies, if you will, that I see will be definitely a benefit for people to look into. Cryptocurrency have been around for a very long time, but now it becomes a little bit more mainstream. And what I mean by mainstream, I see a lot of more companies implementing cryptocurrency as a payment option or blockchain technologies on their platforms. I think Microsoft is hiring an army of blockchain professionals. JP Morgan Chase is hiring an army of blockchain professionals. Now, all of these systems are great, they're technologically advanced and whatnot, but they still need designers. Because designers not only designing everything that goes into the public space, we also design things for the internal use, right? Because we have internally in the company employees who are equal humans. They need to know and be able to accomplish specific tasks within the in-house complex software. The next big thing that I see happening is the metaverse. Of course, I'm going to touch on the subject of the metaverse. How could I not? I mean, for God's sake, Mark Zuckerberg were talking about it last year. Actually, metaverse had been around for a while, and it became more public when Facebook kind of changed their name and made a whole deal about it. But metaverse have been around for a long time. You can start with, I think, mid-2000s of Second Life, which right now the founders of Second Life are coming back to redo certain things and rebuild or build something new. Obviously, you have the Decentraland has been around for a while. Microsoft been working on metaverse. I think IBM was working on some stuff related to that. What I'm trying to say by that is consider it. Try to, and I know there are some courses are popping up here and there about user experience in AR and VR. And I think it will be beneficial to look into that and maybe add this little egg into your basket of skills to kind of go forward into the future and be able to compete in the market with some specific skills that other might not have. Another thing I would say about metaverse is try to also figure out how do you fit not only within a company that builds metaverse, but also other companies that build things within metaverse, right? Because it's not only about working at companies that design the actual experience of metaverse, but also there's a lot of companies that entering the field of doing business in metaverse. Nike, I know Adidas, real estate companies. I think some banks are entering this right now as well. So try to look into that. It's not something that is still kind of wildly being publicized, if you will, by these companies, but they're slowly ramping up and they're slowly kind of building out the teams that will be covering that part of their business. So I would definitely look into that. It's something that I think will be really interesting to tackle as designers. What else we should talk about? I would definitely consider looking into things as animations and 3D. I'm not saying go and learn to become an animator or a 3D artist, but definitely get some at least understanding in how it works, because more and more products are becoming more fluid and more animated. And as UX designers and product designers, we should definitely know how to design with it in mind and be able to work with animators and those creators to be able to create rich and animated experiences. And I guess on that note, I covered everything, I guess, what I wanted to say in the first 20 minutes, which means a lot more stuff or a lot more time for you guys to ask me questions. And I see some questions popping up. What we're going to do is I'm going to answer the questions that I see in messages right now. And then I'll allow you people to basically raise your hand. I'll let you unmute yourself and ask me questions. I think it'll be a lot better experience than just writing. But I'm going to start with the first question from Soya. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Can you go over the difference between product and UX? I know it's used interchangeably, but companies like Google have both product and UX. That's a great question, and it's being asked a lot, actually, in most of my sessions, at least last year. So different companies approach titles and what people do and their specific responsibilities slightly differently. And I'm gonna try and cover it from small tech startup all the way to big tech or even big Fortune 500 company. In a smaller company, somebody who's a product designer or UX designer probably going to be doing both, right? Either the research and UI and visual and marketing and branding and whatnot. It's a hodgepodge of things, right? So for people who do want to try themselves in every possible side of this industry, startups definitely, especially smaller startups like seed or early stage, definitely a place to kind of try yourself out, right? To see what you can do and which part. As you go into a more mature organization, that's when you get kind of the breakdown into more specifics, right? And when I say more specifics, I say product designer will be more responsible for day-to-day kind of working on the product itself, doing some wireframes and putting some UIs together and prototypes and working on some flows, and then maybe testing them right away with some users, right? Working with engineers and whatnot. UX designers are going to be more kind of on the research side. They're going to be more on building the personas, doing the user research, putting together some mental flows or experiences, or user journeys, figuring out the trends from the findings of the research, and then translating it into actual documentation for product designers and engineers to consume and create the actual screens and prototypes and so forth, and then test and work with the product designers on that. Now, when you're looking at a more of a bigger company, right? UX designer might be kind of an umbrella that does a lot, which is the interaction design, the information architecture, user research, user flows, user journeys, personas, usability studies and testing, putting together the wireframes and so forth. So it's a little bit more kind of an umbrella rather than just like a specific profession, if you will. When you're looking at more of a big Fortune 500 companies, that's when you can get a bit confused, right? Because some of them are still kind of trying to figure everything out and figure out what exactly the function of product designer or UX designer, if you will. So yeah, that's really the difference. The way I like to look at it is UX designer is 70% research, 30% visual. Product designer is 70% visual, 30% research. That's how I like to kind of categorize these things. Excuse me. And my camera does that every 30 minutes. I haven't done those sessions in a while and I'm losing my voice. Jesus. Oh, wow. Definitely not YouTube worthy. Okay. I hope I answered Soya's question. Okay, let's go to the next question. How do you find jobs in Metaverse? From Georgia. I don't know. I wish I did. But I think, I know that Facebook on their job posting website, they have a special website for their recruitment. They post their jobs there. Obviously, working with some big tech recruiters, they'll probably have those. LinkedIn, definitely. And just basically going directly to the websites of big companies, right? Like if you go to Facebook, they'll have that. Google will have their own recruiting section of their website. I think Decentraland also have their own kind of a careers page. So just going directly to those companies. I think if you're Googling metaverse, you're probably going to get a list of all the companies that are working on this right now. And that might be helpful to just find their careers pages. What is a good place to start when learning digital animation? And this came from Bryce. I think it will be good to start with some course and some probably videos on YouTube. I know that Figma has some courses for free or some like quick videos of how-tos and stuff. But I think courses would be your best bet to start with. Try Interaction Design Foundation, try Coursera. I think they do have those. But honestly, if you're curious enough, just download After Effects or some other 3D or animation tools and just tinker with them. I think that'll be the best kind of approach to see how do you like it before you go and spend any kind of money on courses and anything like that. Hope I answered your question with that. Karthik, I hope I pronounced him correctly. Is it possible to apply UX design to solve a design problem without primarily creating apps, websites? As a person transitioning to UX design, I would like to know the scope of UX, which does not involve app or websites. Apologies in advance. I have a microphone. Oh, that's okay. Let me try and answer that question. Yes, I guess the short answer is yes. You definitely can apply UX methodologies into solving problems that have nothing to do with websites or apps. UX is not necessarily digital. You can utilize UX methodologies in solving problems such as doors or physical products or houses or government issues, policies, and the list goes on, right? Because problem solving is not only for apps or websites. It can be also for software. It can be also for how do you build a product, a physical product, right? How do you create a park with proper navigation within the park for traffic flow, right? How do you apply and use it for creating roads, bike lanes, traffic lights? All of these have problems. All of these have their own unique needs, and all of these are being used by human beings, right? And so when you're looking at that, then you can definitely utilize UX practices in order to solve problems and real needs of people in everyday life, not necessarily website. You can definitely look into companies like IDEO, which is IDEO. They definitely use design thinking and UX practices in solving real world problems, not necessarily just digital products. You can look into McKinsey. They also utilize, they have a huge department that works with government and big companies to solve their supply chain problems, right? Organizational problems. UX is being utilized for customer experience as well, right? There's another profession in UX, quote unquote, called CX, which is a customer experience, right? How this customer experiences the company, not necessarily just the product. So yeah, it definitely can be utilized elsewhere. Hope that answered your question. Colleen, do you have a favorite site or platform for building a portfolio? I do actually. Squarespace. I personally use Squarespace. I don't have a lot of time, and I'm not hiding it. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I built my own website because I'm a designer. No, I don't have time. Equally, my wife has her own business, and we're also using Squarespace for her business as well. So yeah, but there's Wix, Squarespace. There is a Cargo Collective that also has, it's designed to build specifically portfolios. You can use Behance for that or something like that. But yeah, I use Squarespace. Not sponsored in any way by Squarespace, by the way, but I do use them. Do you have recommended ways or resources to improve visual design skills? Still videos / YouTube from Marisa. Yes. Try to download, if you want to improve your visual skills, then try to go to Dribbble or Behance and just consume a lot of posts from great designers and see, try to analyze every piece of it, right? Shadows, lights, lines, how do they design things? How do they lay out things? And then try to download a lot of the Dribbble PSDs and whatnot for Photoshop or Figma and just deconstruct them. Take them apart, literally element by element, see how it was done, try to understand or analyze how it was done. Apart from that, courses. As I mentioned, Coursera or Interaction Design Foundation. Interaction Design Foundation is a great place for that. You can try that. Still videos on YouTube. I'm not a YouTube professional per se. I'm not a videographer per se. I literally just launched a YouTube channel. So I maybe come back to me with this question in about half a year. I'll might be able to answer that. But other than that, I don't think I have an answer apart from just YouTube videos on the subject. Okay, next one we have Anastasia. What is the most effective way to network? Places, organizations, Slack channels right now, since the pandemic and stuff, obviously Slack channels, ADP list, different events, design events, definitely design events is a great place to network. LinkedIn, awesome place to network. I would say Twitter, because I see a lot of designers utilizing Twitter for that. I don't. My Twitter is really bad. I have maybe 100 and some followers and I barely do anything on Twitter. I don't think I connect to the platform that much. But yeah, events and different groups. There is a massive list and I don't think I know that list right now. But if you Google, I think if you Google a list of best design Slack channels, we'll come up with a list of all these channels. Don't go connecting with all of them because it's going to be very overwhelming. I can tell you right now, because I'm in like 10 or 15. And sometimes some people messaging and stuff, it can be really overwhelming. Some of these groups have tens of thousands of people from around the world. So yeah, just be selective. Select the ones that you think will be most beneficial for you. Clubhouse, I think works for that well as well. And there are a bunch of design kind of groups where you can join and just listen in. I hope that answers your question. Frank, what are your thoughts about zero UI design in the future? Let's try and deconstruct that. Zero UI design. Zero UI design can be approached in different ways, right? One is design systems, where you don't design UI anymore. It's already there. Just utilize the elements. Or there is actually no UI whatsoever, and everything is what? Sound, voice. It's still UI, just of a different form. I don't think UI design will go away, if that's your question. Or maybe that's a new trend that I'm still not aware of, the zero UI thing. And if anything, while I'm with you guys, let's see what that is. That what you meant, or is that something else? Yeah, it's mostly voice gestures. Yep. So without knowing this explanation, I already knew what you meant, really. I think we're definitely going to have more of that. We're definitely going there. but depends on the technology. It did fail on some level with TVs. I don't know if some of you remember 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was tech coming out. I think Microsoft was one of those companies developing a camera where your TV and things on your TV will respond to your gestures and your voice and whatnot. And we kind of got stuck around with voice mostly. And I think it's going to continue to get developed. I think it's just going to get better. And it is part of the metaverse as well, right? Where we might stop utilizing keyboards or any kind of UIs and whatnot, and just utilize our voice and gestures. So yeah, it goes in line with learning how to use that and learning how to design for that. Voice design is incredibly fascinating. I can tell you right now. We are exploring something in my company right now, and it's been fascinating for sure. What are the differences? What are the difference between copywriter and a UX writer from? I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Moyawa. I apologize if I butchered your name. The difference between copywriter and UX writer, as I mentioned before, copywriters are great with writing the copy, meaning you say, I want this text on this page to be better for marketing purposes, product purposes, sales purposes, and whatnot. UX writer is somebody who does not necessarily write text. They look at the overall experience of the product and they try to realize and understand which word or a few words or a message or an error message would be best at different stages of user journey for the product to be more delightful, for the user to be less confused, and for the product to feel more as another person talking to them. Great example of that is a company called Lemonade. Lemonade is an insurance company from Israel, and they're operating mostly in the United States, I think. Their entire product is you're interacting with a bot, literally AI bot, but it feels like you're talking to a person. And everything you need to do in the app, right? File a claim, get a quote, and everything else, it feels like you're texting your buddy because you're getting a text. You're applying to a text based on a reply, and it just becomes a conversation about your quote, right? Your needs for your insurance or your claim. It's not anymore fill up this entire form of a claim, send it to us, we'll review and come back to you. No, it's literally a conversation. I would highly recommend everyone here who's interested in that, searching for Lemonade AI bot claim process on YouTube, like searching for that, and you'll see the entire interaction. It's incredible. I hope that answered your question. Emily, Adobe Creative Cloud has a portfolio maker. Yes, yes, they do. I don't know how good it is though. So just keep in mind. So Colleen, I use Wix. Wix, not a bad platform. They got definitely better in recent years. Another ADP list mentor suggests a UX folio. Yep, could be. Discord also has several. I know some people utilizing Notion for portfolio building as well. I've seen some, but I think it's a personal preference more than anything else. Lauren asks about accessibility. Here's my take about accessibility. If you want to have, if you want to get a job you're looking for, accessibility definitely going to be your best addition. But I will definitely ask people, do not, and I repeat, do not go studying accessibility just because you're trying to get a job. Accessibility is one of those skills that you really have to be empathetic towards people with disabilities, because just knowing how to build accessible products does not actually build accessible products, surprisingly. Just by utilizing, I don't know, some W3C standards and Section 508 and building your website or an app, Yeah, it will cover your basis, if you will, and it will definitely help you with some legal cases or your company, but it will not help you build better products designed for people with disabilities. You really have to care about that. So it's definitely a huge benefit to have that because more and more companies are looking for that. A lot of them not from the good reasons, but from legal perspective to cover themselves. But nonetheless, it's a good skill to have. The reason why I didn't say it at the beginning, because I don't want to make it sound like this is a trend and people have to jump on it. Accessibility is incredibly important, but it's important when you really care about that. And not just because, well, if I'm going to have that certificate on my LinkedIn, then I'm going to get a job much more quicker than somebody else. You really have to care about it. Because when companies do care about that and they do hire somebody who specializes or understands in accessibility, they expect you to care. So it's going to have to be something that you really, really care about. So think about that way. Emily, what is our role in helping companies comply with accessibility guidelines? Again, it depends, right? Um, if you understand in accessibility anything, then your role will be to apply it. If you don't, then your role will be to make sure the product that you're designing are at least compliant with the 1A standard. 1A compliance standard, that means such things as color blindness, visual impairment, and on-screen readers. So that means is visuals in the product needs to have alternative text. Your color contrast needs to be enough for people with different visual disabilities to be able to read. Your text has to be adjustable if they need to be. You not put any text on top of pictures because it's hard to read, and you allow your product to be zoomed in if need be. And there's some other stuff that I'm not going to cover right now. Your responsibility is to make sure you cover at least the basis when you're designing. That's all. Anastasia again, I am very interested in voice design. Can you recommend companies, people who do good job in this field and one can learn from? Amazon, their Echo devices and their, hold on, I am going to mute mine because I have one on my desk. Their Alexa devices are really good. And they have a free Alexa developer portal that has a lot of educational materials on how to design and build voice UIs, if you will, for their product. It's a great resource for people who want to learn how to do that because it's free and you can just tinker with it. You can probably buy one of those, they have refurbished little Alexa devices, those pucks, for like 15, 20 bucks, and then just experiment with it. I hope that answers your question. All right, this is all the questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, I see Dima. I hear a lot. You should know what are your targets to work with later. Let me see that again. I hear a lot. You should know what are your targets to work with later. I couldn't understand what does it mean. Do they mean working for Facebook, Google, or so? If yes, then what are the other options? Dima, can you do me a favor? Can you unmute yourself and maybe elaborate on that question? Because I don't think I understand that. Your voice is not good. Okay. Let me try and understand. Can you rephrase your question then in the chat so I can understand better? While Dima is rephrasing his question, does anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask more questions? Come on, guys, interrogate me. That's what I'm here for. No one has questions. Or raise your hand. I'll unmute you.
Hey, I have a question.
Hey, go ahead.
This Will. Hi. So I finished the program May of last year, and haven't really dove fully into finding UX UI jobs because of my other work. Is there any like recommended way of maybe keeping those skills kind of sharp while you're kind of in between jobs? I guess this could probably go for like freelancing as well, where you might have jobs here and there, but not necessarily anything like full time all the time. So yeah, is there anything you recommend in terms of trying to keep those skills sharp? That sort of thing while you're in between jobs, I guess, UX and UI jobs.
Well, that's a good question. I guess it's maybe a good place to be in when you don't necessarily need to go and find a job right away when you finish a course. So you can do several things. You can continue reading materials on the subject. You can continue follow the industry. You can continue kind of tinker with things and play around for your own sake in Figma or Sketch or XD, whatever you'd prefer. You can definitely try and what I like to do, right? I like to look at things in my life every day, right? I go grocery shopping or I'm using some product. My mind is like kind of trying to kind of see what the problem or the flow or the experience and whatnot. So it's essentially applying my skills without necessarily actually designing or working on a specific product on the kind of a daily basis, right? Or you can do things for your friends. You have friends that have, I don't know, businesses or ideas or whatnot, just tinker with them if you don't necessarily want to dive into freelancing. But freelancing could be a good option to kind of keep your skills sharp and keep doing what you learn to do. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, perfect. I kind of have a semi follow-up, but I think I think what you actually answered might have given me the answer as well. And it's kind of portfolio related where outside of class assignments and whatnot, I see in the chat somebody mentioned volunteering. I guess it's just trying to get things onto your portfolio that you are that you can utilize to find jobs. But I see that there's some answers already out there.
Portfolio is not necessarily somewhere where you have to showcase only the places you worked at. You can showcase your personal projects. You can showcase your experimentations. I honestly, since last year and for a long time, been recommending people of like, you studied to be a UX designer or product designer or whatnot. Why wouldn't you eat your own cake? Just apply the same thing for building your own portfolio and then showcase it on your portfolio as a case study. I don't think there's a simpler way of going about building your first case study, right? Is I applied my skills to make my portfolio better. And here is the case study, right? That will be fascinating. Like I have, from hundreds of applicants or hundreds of designers that I've interviewed and worked with and mentored and so forth in the last year, I've seen only, I think, 2 that actually did that. And that's fascinating. These people are really, I'm like, yep, I want to talk to this person. Why? Because they apply that every single day to their needs, right? So yeah, try that.
All right, thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. Emily Lipolis. Lipolis?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's Lipolis.
It's okay. I apologize.
No, nobody gets it correctly. It's okay. So I guess this is a 2-part question. One, what previous jobs, like previous roles, do you think lead to like the best successes in transitioning? Is there a specific field that you see transitioning really well into UX? And then, I'm coming from a pretty unique background, and how do you have advice on sort of spinning your story into being about UX for that interview?
You mind me asking what's your background or where you're coming from?
I was a costume designer,
Okay.
and then I became a lawyer and did election law.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Okay. So I can say there are a few things, right? Obviously, transitioning from creative profession to creative profession is a lot easier than transitioning from non-creative into creative profession. Because you've kind of been doing this for a while, just maybe in a different way or from a different part of it. I would say that honestly, the most successful UXers that I've seen that are the ones who transitioned from architecture and interior design. I know it kind of sounds very specific, but thus far, and I might be a little bit biased because I'm coming from this kind of industry. I came from graphic design, and then I went for architecture and interior design. I dropped out of college and pursued, web design and digital at the beginning of early 2000s. So maybe I am a little bit biased, but yeah, thus far, people that I've seen that become incredibly successful and really quickly rising through the ranks as product designers or UX designers are people who came from architecture and interior design. I think for one single reason is that architecture is equally kind of problem solving, very technical, very detailed, and at the same time, incredibly creative and kind of artistic, right? So it's like an interesting combo of both. And UX and product design is that. It's a combo of both, right? It's not just being a UI designer or visual designer or just a researcher. It's a combo of both. How do you tell your story to kind of sell yourself better? Make a list. Make a list of everything you've known from your quote unquote previous life, right? Professional life, and see what are the parallels in UX design and product design, and then tell your story from the perspective of here's all the things that I know from my previous experience that I can easily apply in my current or future experience that will be incredibly beneficial for your company. Why? Because since I studied law, when I'm designing your website, I can also design with legal perspective in mind for, I don't know, making sure that there's no legal implications in certain, I don't know, colors or layouts or accessibility compliance or stuff like that, right? Equally from fashion design, you can say I'm incredibly artistic because I used to design costumes or whatnot, or being a fashion designer. So just draw some parallels between what you used to do and how it can be translated into UX and design product. I hope that answered your question. Okay, we have some questions, I think, in the chat, and we got left about 6 minutes. I'm going to try and cover them. From Ben, I love the idea of working for a startup and a product designer role so that I can get exposure to many areas, but would I start up want someone more qualified because they need to be an all-rounder, i.e. you might be only UX? Yes. Ben, it's a great question, and I'll answer it in two parts. One is, you're right, startups typically do like finding somebody with more experience that can basically cover all bases. However, early stage startups typically in a very interesting predicament, they don't have enough money. Somebody with a lot more experience costs a lot more. So they spend a lot more time trying to find that one talented person that is still in its kind of a early journey of their career. So they will cost them, I don't know, 60, 70, maybe 80K instead of 150. Why? Because they're on a shoestring budget. So no, that should not deter you from applying, especially to early stage startups. You can find those on AngelList and try to start there. Dima, okay. when doing portfolio or case study, I hear they say you should know your target. Okay. Thank you. I don't agree with that. I know what you mean. Some managers, some recruiters would say, yes, know your target. And when they say that, at least in my opinion, or from at least recruiters that I know personally, what they mean is design for your target audiences, right? Your target audience is a recruiter, hiring manager, and so forth. That means, as I mentioned earlier, try to utilize your own skills for your own portfolio, do the research. How do your hiring managers read your website? Where do they go? How do they navigate? What kind of navigation you should have there, and so forth. Google, for instance, when you're going through a recruitment process at Google, they will review your portfolio and they'll give you specific notes on how to change or improve your portfolio before you go on a big kind of a presentation process with a big team, because that's part of the process. But you should design your portfolio the way you see fit for you, for your portfolio to express who you are. However, know your people, know the people that will be using your website, because your website is not for you. Your website is for them. I think that's what it means, and that's what I personally believe in. I hope that answers your question. Okay, thanks. Bryce, given the explosion of fresh interest in UX field, what advice do you have for UX newcomers? What is the best way to stand out in a crowded field of applicants? Bryce, is a great question. I've been talking about it since last year. Let me grab a sip of water. Storytelling. That's how you stand out. Make sure that your case studies are not identical. That's not a problem that I see a lot in this industry. People copy each other and then they just replicate those case studies to look exactly the same, which is different name of a quote unquote company or product. Each case study has its own uniqueness. It might start with user research. It might start with UIs or wireframes or flows and then go to research, right? Not everything is the same. Not everything follows the same pattern. So when you show that on your portfolio and your case studies, that shows me as a hiring manager that you didn't do the same cookie cutter thing on every single project you worked on. You approached it from an individual perspective. You identified the needs of a project, and then you applied necessary steps in order to accomplish your task or success rate at that project, which might not mean that you need to do user research, which might mean that you already have UIs from the company. You just need to test them, right? Everything is very unique and different in real life. Boot camps are typically taking people on a very specific kind of a step-by-step journey of how to build things, but that's not the reality of the real world. So keep that in mind. So should our case studies be individual? Yes, I just answered that. Definitely. I've heard mixed answers. Some people have said you should have group case studies because you'll never work alone. Not necessarily. You should definitely mention what was your role on that project, but you definitely it's your case study. Like that's your portfolio. You're expressing from your perspective what you worked on. So no. Thank you for that. Thanks so much. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Varun. How and where to explore project ideas for the metaverse? Join a few of them. Join Decentraland, join some metaverse, and just try to use it. See if there's any kind of problems with it, and then try to address them if that's what you want to do. All right, so that kind of concludes the session recording. I really want to thank you for staying for all this time of listening to this 1 hour of a session. Yes, it's very long typically because I want to make sure that there's enough time for people to ask me questions. So once again, thank you for this time. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this. And once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you always know when I'm posting new videos. And I hope you enjoyed the session, and I will see you next time. And don't forget, never stop learning. See ya.